Hey kids, and welcome again to Little Pilgrim's Promise. Saddle up, get ready. Today we're going to continue our journey as we learn more about the Puritans in England. We'll also learn about why they became such a big deal. Today, England is a part of an area of Europe called the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom tree has 4 branches: England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. England is where we'll start, since it is the main location where the Puritan beliefs caught on like wildfire. Christians had been in England for over 1,000 years, but as we learned, remember, the wicked King Henry VIII, started his own church, the Church of England, in the year 1534. Well, King Henry died in the year 1547, and his son took the throne, Edward VI. Edward was only 9 years old when he took the throne. Edward VI was the first English monarch to be raised as a Protestant. Because he was young, he had 16 rulers help him do his job as king. He loved to pay attention to religious matters, which was a good thing. One of these rulers that helped him in religious matters was a man named Thomas Cranmer. Well, Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, received a special mission. The first mission that King Edward VI gave to Thomas Cranmer, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury, was that he had to write a special prayer book. And it was going to be a guide for worship for the whole country of England. So Thomas Cranmer wrote the Book of Common Prayer in the year 1549 and then again in 1552. Well, at first that doesn't sound so bad, does it? Well, at this same time, the king wrote a law called the Act of Uniformity. And the law stated that every church in England had to do church services exactly how the book said to. Also, if a man was going to be a pastor, he could only become a pastor exactly how the book said to do it. And that's it. If you didn't follow Thomas Cranmer's Book of Common Prayer, you could be put in jail for 6 months, a year, if you didn't follow it 2 times. And if you didn't follow it a 3rd time, you could be put in jail for life. This was a bit harsh, for sure. The pastors and Christians in England loved that Protestants were reforming the church. The Reformation in England needed to keep going, though. The work of Reformation wasn't finished. Under Edward VI, the Protestants didn't get to change a whole lot or achieve a whole lot. The Book of Common Prayer, written in 1552, was actually only used for a few months because King Edward VI died. Well, he was only 16 years old. He was really young. He didn't rule for that long. Who was going to take the throne after him? Was a Protestant next in line to take the throne? What would become of the country? King Edward wanted a Protestant to take the throne after him, of course. So he tried to make a rule right before he died that Mary, his older sister, would never be allowed to be queen. He thought, correctly, that Mary would undo all of the Protestant reforms and make England a Roman Catholic country again. So, when he died, he made Lady Jane Grey queen. Because she was Protestant. Well, how do you think Mary took the news that she wasn't going to become queen after all? Do you think she was happy about it? Not in the slightest. She actually gathered a small army and came and kicked Lady Jane Grey right off the throne. Well, what's so bad about Mary? We don't really know much about her, but she has a nice name, right? Even Jesus' mother was named Mary. But nope, Mary was very Roman Catholic, and she worked really hard to reverse the Reformation in England. So you remember the Book of Common Prayer that Thomas Cranmer wrote? Well, Mary banned it and made all the churches follow Catholic worship again. During her reign, if you were Protestant, you could be put to death. She actually sent almost 300 Protestants to be burned at the stake. One of the people she burned at the stake was the man who wrote that Book of Common Prayer, Thomas Cranmer. Even though Cranmer cowardly said that he didn't believe in Reformed teachings anymore, she still had him burned. This is why she became known as Bloody Mary. Well, Mary was well on her way to making England Catholic again, but only after being on the throne for 5 years, she got very sick and died. Her sister, Elizabeth, then took the throne. She was Elizabeth I, and you guys may know that the Queen of England today is Queen Elizabeth II. The Reformed in England could take a big, relaxing, deep breath when Elizabeth I became queen because she was Protestant. Edward VI reigned 6 years. Mary I reigned 5 years. But guess how long Elizabeth I got to reign? She reigned 45 years. She was a very level-headed politician and queen, and even though she was Protestant and made the church in England Protestant again, she didn't burn Catholics at the stake. She was much more level-headed. It was during Elizabeth's reign that the country of England flourished. Her reign is what people call the Elizabethan Era. And it was during this time that the famous playwright William Shakespeare wrote a lot of his stuff. During the reign of Elizabeth, the Protestants loved the reforms that were happening to the Church of England, but some people believed that the church should not be controlled by the state. What I mean by controlled by the state is controlled by the government. The Bible teaches very different jobs for both the church and the state. The church is not in charge of the state, and the state is not in charge of the church. Both have different jobs, and both are under the lordship of Jesus. Well, if England was a Protestant country now, What rules did they have that could be so bad under Elizabeth? Well, right at the beginning of Elizabeth's reign, she made another law called the Act of Uniformity. The law said that every church in the whole country had to use the Book of Common Prayer for worship, and that every person had to go to church at least once a week, or you could be fined 12 pence. Today, that would mean if you didn't go to church at least one time a week, you would get fined $15. Do you think you should be fined for missing church? Should the state be the one dealing with you and whether you go to church or not? No, your pastor should be the one talking to you about that kind of stuff. Also, what if you wanted to say a different prayer at the beginning or at the end of your church service? What if instead of following the Bible readings in the Book of Common Prayer, you wanted to choose your own Bible readings? Well, pastors that did this could get arrested and could get fined. Also, it was against the law to have a church service in a home or anywhere except in an official church of the Church of England. Many Protestants, believing that people should have religious freedom, they didn't like this at all. These Protestants separated themselves from the Church of England and formed independent churches of their own. And this was highly illegal at the time. These Christians, though, held tight to the freedom that Christ had given them. Being told by the Queen that they had to go to church exactly how she said was not freedom at all. These Christians were called separatists or nonconformists. Because they did not conform to the rules of the Church of England. So how did the Puritans' belief spread like wildfire, as I said? Well, it was during this Elizabethan era of flourishing and freedom that a very important man grew up and then began to teach at Cambridge. His name is William Perkins. Perkins lived from 1558 to 1602, almost the exact years of Elizabeth's reign. Perkins was a very strong believer and teacher of Reformed teachings. Perkins did follow the rules of the Church of England, but there was a growing number of people called separatists that Perkins understood why they believed what they did. He was sympathetic to their beliefs. He wanted the Puritans to stay within the church and change it from within. Nevertheless, Perkins and his influence spread, and many say that Perkins is the first Puritan. You remember the teaching called Coram Deo, before the face of God? The separatists took this teaching to heart. They believed that they must obey God as God says in the Bible, not as the Queen says. If the Church of England wasn't going to reform, they wanted the freedom to live before the face of God and reform the church in their cities according to the Bible. During this time, more and more of the Puritans were being stirred up by these convictions. They wanted to obey God rather than just obey the Queen. There were many things that they would leave out of the worship services that the Book of Common Prayer told them to do during worship services. Even though Queen Elizabeth wasn't burning heretics at the stake, her laws were still making life dreadful for Puritans. They were constantly fighting for the freedom to worship God as they believed God told them to in the Bible. What would the separatists, these early Puritans, do? Would they conform? Would they change the Queen's mind, maybe? What happens when Queen Elizabeth dies and the next ruler takes the throne? Will that next ruler be Protestant or not? Will the next ruler continue to reform the church, or will that next ruler be even harsher? We'll answer those questions and learn about what the Puritans do in lesson number 3. But for now, let's ask some questions. You guys ready? Mm-hmm. So when I name a king or queen, raise your hand and answer whether they were Protestant or Catholic. Okay? Think you can do that? Mm-hmm. All right. King Edward the Sixth. Lila, was he Protestant or Catholic?
He was Protestant.
Good job. All right, you guys. Lila, you can't answer again, okay? We have 2 more. All right. Queen Mary the First. Blaine.
Catholic.
Catholic. Good job. You're listening. All right. Last one. Lila and Blaine, you're out. Queen Elizabeth the First. Nora. What was she?
Protestant.
Good job. For extra credit, can anyone tell me how long their reigns were? Lucas, what do you got?
I know that Queen Elizabeth reign was 42 years.
45 years. Super close. Good job. Blaine, do you remember the other ones?
Edward the Sixth, I believe, was 10 years, and
6. Real close though. What about Queen Mary, Lila? Do you remember?
She was only 5 years.
Good job. Only 5 years. Next question. What was a separatist? Go ahead, Eddie.
People that separated from the Church of England.
Perfect. Way to go, bud. Okay.
Englishmen.
Next question. What would happen to you if you didn't follow the Book of Common Prayer in your church? Lila's hand's up first.
You would have been arrested.
Good job. Okay. Last question. Under the Act of Uniformity in 1558, under Queen Elizabeth, what would happen to you if you didn't go to church at least once a week? Eddie.
You would be fined 12 pence.
How much money would that be today?
$15.
That's right. All right, well, that concludes lesson number 2 of Little Pilgrim's Promise. But stay tuned because there's a whole lot more to learn in lesson number 3.